only place for everything Vikings. 6, 1, 2, Vikings.
Welcome back to the 612 Vikings podcast. I'm your host, Dustin, alongside Drew, a.k.a. Skull TV. And after a longer hiatus than normal, I was having fun on some Labor Day weekend. And Drew, how was your weekend, your Labor Day weekend? We're one step closer to football. We got football tomorrow night, actually. So, yeah, Drew, how we doing?
We're doing fine. Had a barbecue on Sunday and Monday, so definitely a lot of cookouts. So something a little different this year compared to years past. But you know, we're going into week 1 of the NFL. There's a lot of hope for all 32 teams in the league, hoping that things can finally turn around or things stay the same from last year, depending on what side of the coin you are on. But we'll see how things play out, and we're gonna probably go through the schedule and see what the Vikings' outlook for the season is, with now a different outlook than before, with Sam Darnold at quarterback, with no J.J. McCarthy this year. So,
yeah, so like Drew just said, we're going to take a look at the Minnesota Vikings schedule, get our last-minute predictions in there, and just see how accurate we can get this. We'll probably look back at it at the end of the season and see how close or not close we were by the end of the season, and we'll go from there. So let's put this up on the screen, and we'll get that banner all the way. So starting off, as we all know, on the road at the New York Giants. Drew, we'll start with you. You can give a little summary on what will happen or what won't happen, and then W and L.
Yeah, this is going to be a win for the Vikings. You know, they're the road favorite going into this one. I've seen some people kind of giving some love to the Giants. I don't really understand why. Outside of that, I mean, they do have a good D-line. Definitely will give the Vikings a challenge, but there really isn't much that you could stop when you have a Justin Jefferson on your team. There's ways around that. You know, the Bengals have shown how to win football games with a bad O-line. And I think the Vikings will prove that in the Meadowlands or MetLife Stadium now for this upcoming Week 1 game. So I'm going to have the Vikings winning by 10 plus points in this one too. So,
yeah, I kind of have like a similar prediction where I think that they will win this game as well, and then maybe win it by probably closer to 7 points, I want to say. I think it will be a tougher game than what we think. Like, I don't think that we're going to blow them out like we did to the Chargers back in like 2019. Nothing like that, obviously. But as long as Sam Darnold can contain his turnovers, really limit those. Justin Jefferson is back to his old self. Aaron Jones is running the ball great. The defense is taking another step from last year. I think that we got this game single-handedly. So yeah, I think the Vikings will win the first game here. So that leads us to week 2, our home opener against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, last year we hosted the Niners on, Monday Night Football, and we won that game off of being underdogs. So now they're coming here earlier in the season, week 2, and I don't know if they'll be as good as they were last year. Another year older, coming off a Super Bowl loss. Drew, how are we feeling about this game?
I think this will be a little bit of a different time coming around. We do get Justin Jefferson, most likely, assuming he can stay healthy for week 1, which obviously knock on wood that happens. But the Niners are clear of all their holdouts. Ayuk is going to be playing. Trent Williams is going to be playing after a little stint of a holdout. But I'm going to go with the Niners on this one. I think they're a lot healthier now this time around than the last time. It seemed like the last time they were really relying heavily on Christian McCaffrey to really get things going. And I just don't think that a Jordan Addison strip out of Charvarius Ward for a touchdown to end the half is going to save us this time around. So I'm going to give this as a loss to the Vikings, bringing us to 1-1. Going into week 3.
Yeah, I kind of have that similar thing too, where we start off 1-1 against the 49ers. They're going to be coming in hot as always. They're just one of the better teams in the NFL. And coming in week 2, I don't know what the 49ers schedule looks like, and nor do I really care that much. But coming in on the road, it's going to be tough like last year was. But last year they were missing Trent Williams and Debo, a couple other guys too. And Drake Greenlaw was coming off an injury. We were really trying to attack him as well. So a little different story than last year, as you were saying. I do think that we drop one to the 49ers in our home opener. That leads us to week 3 versus the Houston Texans at noon. Texans are another up-and-coming team. I'm glad we get to play him at home as well. You got CJ Stroud, another year of him. Stephon Diggs got traded to them from the Bills earlier this offseason. Danielle Hunter, familiar faces coming back to US Bank Stadium. So, Drew, how we feeling about the Houston Texans coming into this building? And, some familiar faces we're going to be seeing as well.
Yeah, there's a lot on the line. This is Stephon Diggs' first time back into Minnesota since being traded from the Vikings after that 2019 season. So I expect it to be a very rowdy stadium. Stephon Diggs is going to get booed very heavily. I would expect that out of the Vikings fans, especially after the way that he left too. But, there might have been some things that might have been the reason that we'll maybe talk about in another episode. But and another thing is too, we've never lost to the Houston Texans. But I do think that we are due for a loss. I do think that we are going to drop to the Houston Texans, and we're going to be at 1-2 going into week 4.
Okay, I kind of have a different outlook on this. I think the Texans, they're a good team. Don't get me wrong. I don't think they're as good as a team like the 49ers, though. And I think this will be like a more true home opener to us, where we will get that win in a tough gauntlet of these first couple games after obviously the New York game, where you have San Francisco, Houston, at Green Bay, in London against the Jets, where we are undefeated there too. We'll get to that, but I think we come away with one of these games at home where we win, whether that's the 49ers, Houston, whatever it is in this gauntlet. Detroit up on the schedule too. So I don't know. I just have a weird feeling that whether we win by 3 points, 1 point, 10 points, I just have a weird feeling that we can beat the Houston Texans. My heart says the Vikings will win. My brain says they probably won't, but I'll put a win, a big significant win for the Vikings in week 3 against the Texans here at home. So that will lead us to week 4, going on the road to Green Bay, Wisconsin. My old stomping grounds, not necessarily Green Bay, but back in Wisconsin. We don't get a late Green Bay trip, which is really nice, but it is still Lambeau Field. It's still Green Bay. September 29th. Not terribly cold yet. You might get some good weather yet still. Maybe some 50, 60 degree weather. So we'll see how that goes. Drew, how are we feeling against Green Bay, especially how we did last year in Lambeau?
Well, I will say this will be a very big game for our wide receivers, considering that both of them do very well against Jair Alexander. As much as Packer fans like to show the little meme and gif or whatever of him hitting the gritty, even though that's all they really have. But the stats show Justin Jefferson has performed very well against Green Bay, averaging almost 80 to 90 yards a game. And then Jordan Addison, when he has a capable quarterback throwing him the football, is done really well, especially on the road in Lambeau Field. So I'm actually gonna go with the win for this one on the road in Lambeau Field. I do think they're gonna get the win, and they'll be at 2-2. Just like I feel like they always start off 2-2 for some very odd reason, dating back to the Zimmer years. But I'm gonna say they go 2-2 at the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, for this one, I'm just super torn on this because I feel like it really could go either way. And I feel like by the end of the game, it could be a 10-point game on either side of the ball. Now, that's if Jordan Love continues his 8-game stretch that he had last year, where he played really well and possibly an MVP candidate last year. Outside of the first couple of games that he had, the last 8 games were great for Jordan Love. So we'll have to see how injuries play a factor, if we're a healthier team than Green Bay is by that time. And like you said, wide receivers on our side will have to step up. Jefferson, Addison, we'll see what Addison's status is. I don't think anything will be affected by the Green Bay game, but Hawkinson will still be out. He'll be returning around the Jets Detroit game, somewhere around there. So I want to say that I'll probably go with the win as well in Green Bay. We do fairly well in Green Bay outside of a few turnovers that really have costed the games in the past, but we have kept it close before. So I will go with a win in Green Bay as well. And then we travel week 5 to London to take on the New York Jets and Aaron Rodgers and a great Jets defense. And Sam Darnold is playing one of his former teams like he did against the 49ers, but against the Jets where the Jets drafted him. So in London, Vikings are undefeated in London against the Steelers and Browns, I believe. And now we're going to be playing the Jets. Oh, and we also played the Saints a couple years ago too. So still undefeated. And New York Jets, how are we feeling?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Vikings have ever lost in London. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, they've never lost.
And I don't know if the Jets have been a team that has traveled over to London as well. Correct me if I'm wrong. We can find out later.
That one I don't know.
I don't know either. But the factor in the Aaron Rodgers is coming off an Achilles tear. I feel like it kind of has to be a two-way street. I feel like if you're gonna knock down Kirk for his Achilles tear for Atlanta and why they would suck, you got to stay on the same side of the street with Aaron Rodgers, especially being older and in his 40s too. I think you got to be a little bit consistent there. I think it really is just going to depend on what Aaron Rodgers are we getting. Are we getting more, the last time a quarterback from Green Bay played for New York in his first full season didn't really work out too well. So I'm gonna actually say they get a win here too, because I feel like they've got a little bit more experience going into London, knowing how to properly train and prepare for that long trip across the pond. And I do think now with Darnold actually, having that quality team around him for the first time in his career, can finally truly get that revenge game where, the Jets have a good squad. The Vikings, around talent-wise, around Sam Darnold has a good squad. And like I said, it's usually going to come down to how well Sam Darnold does. Can he stop the turnovers? Can Aaron Jones get the run game going? Can he stay healthy? So that's kind of a wait and see. But I think if fully healthy, I do think we have a good chance. I'm going to give us a win here in London as well, going us to 3-2.
Yeah, for me, I think it's going to be just a quick L for me. I think that Jets defense, depending on health, will be a little too much for Sam Darnold, depending on how well he plays through those first couple games. And if he's still seeing ghosts, I think that trend would continue against a really good Jets defense. And I think we lose our undefeated streak and lose one against the New York Jets. Next is our bye week. We don't really have to talk about anything about that. To me, honestly, it's a little early for a bye week. That's my only grudge about that. I wish it was more around that at Chicago versus Arizona range, but that's just me. Yeah. Returning from London and the bye week, we are playing the Detroit Lions at home, October 20th. TJ Hawkinson is probably on track to return to this game or possibly the New York Jets game, but regardless, you will most likely have Hawkinson for this game. Drew, how are we feeling about the Detroit Lions coming back to US Bank Stadium?
Yeah, and I did forget to mention this too. I think TJ Hawkinson comes back against the Jets. That's kind of what tilted me to getting that the win. I think that's really what it's going to depend on. Their linebackers are solid. I think those kind of linebackers that they have over there are getting a little bit older, if I'm correct. So if Hawkinson plays, that might teeter the win for me there. But I do think he comes back against the Jets, which is why I'm going with the win there. But going to Detroit, this is a tough one. Nick Mullins threw all over them last time. The Lions, they have a solid defensive line with Lee McNeil, Aiden Hutchinson. James Houston was a guy who had a really good rookie season, hasn't really done much, and seems to be one of those one-year wonder kind of guys. I still fear the Lions defense is still going to be really bad, even with the addition of Carlton Davis and the rookies that they made. I think rookie corners, they take their time. It's like a pot roast. You gotta cook it long time, have it, longer it sits there, the better it tastes. It's not like a microwavable kind of meal sort of thing. We can't all draft Sauce Gardners, especially late in the first round like that, which is very rare to happen. But for me, the fact that Nick Mullins threw for 400 plus yards on them, threw the 4 touchdowns, and it's still a 7-point game, even with all those turnovers alone. And it's at home. I do think the Vikings still take this one at home. I think they finally break that little drought against the Lions with Sam Darnold. And Sam Darnold is a guy historically to perform very, very well against Detroit as well. So I'm going to take the Vikings here to beat the Lions at home coming out of the bye too. I just think that everything is lined up for them to take a win here, especially coming off that bye week.
Okay. Now, I was kind of on the fence about this one too, but my short little summary will be the Lions, they swept us last year, and we were very close to winning that first game with our winner wideout game. Nick Mullins threw the 400 yards, fine and dandy until he threw that last interception, ended the game. I think Sam Darnold is a upgrade from Nick Mullins. I think we all can somewhat agree on that in some ways or another. I think, depending on health again, that this is a very winnable game at home against the Detroit Lions, where they don't have a great defense, really. They quote unquote upgraded from last year, but I don't think it's enough to really move the needle that much. So I think that the Vikings do get a win here coming off of that bye week. And I don't know, that Lions defense just does not scare me. It doesn't move the needle one bit for me. And that's just my take on it. So let's see, we're on week, 7, 8. So
we're on I think we're at week 8 now because of the bye. So we're
8.
going on the road to LA, going to SoFi yet again. And I believe this is the first time Kevin O'Connell's playing against Sean McVay since he left to go to Minnesota, if I'm correct. So, so I'll start with this one first. I'll be quick. I think this will be a loss for the Vikings going on the road, cross country, very long flight. And I do think this is a Thursday night game too, especially coming off a divisional game, which I do expect it to be a dogfight. I think they're going to put a lot more energy on this Detroit game more than that LA game. There's just too much at stake, I think, especially with it being a divisional game, and everything's going to be a dogfight for this whole season. I'm going to give it to the LA Rams. I think Matthew Stafford. I think the big thing is health too. Stafford, he's got to stay healthy. He's been kind of banged up every now and then. Puka Nacua is kind of banged up coming into the season. Cooper Kupp has been kind of unreliable as well. Their one season that they had, I think they're missing all. Obviously Puka wasn't on the team yet, but Cooper Kupp and Stafford is really what makes that engine go. But I do think they're going to stay healthy for this game this time around, and I'm going to give it to the Rams to bring the Vikings to 4-3.
I know I'm pretty boring with this one, but I'm going to have to agree with you, Drew. And I think that we do take a loss, and for the exact reasons that you mentioned, where it's going to be a dogfight in the NFC North, just against everybody else too, the Packers Lions, the Packers Bears, the Lions Bears, whatever it is, whoever plays each other, it's going to be a dogfight regardless. And like you said, they're going to put more emphasis on that Detroit game rather than the Rams. I know they're both NFC games, but at the same time, I think that they do drop one to the Rams on Thursday Night Football. One of 2 of our standard, nothing changed schedule for primetime games, where we have a Thursday night and a Monday night game this year. So one of our primetime games, I think that we're going to lose. And this is definitely a loss for me as well. So going back at home against the Indianapolis Colts, the last time that they were in this building, not very good things have happened to the Colts outside of the first half of when they were last year. When it was 33-0, ended up being, what was the final score? Like 33-34, 36?
I believe it was 39-36. I believe
39-36.
I think the Colts kicked a field goal in that second half. Chase McLaughlin pretty early, and then we scored pretty rampantly after that. So,
okay. So what are we thinking for that game?
This one's a tough one because Anthony Richardson, his rookie season, showed flashes that he can be a quality quarterback in this league. And I have gone on record saying I'm not the biggest Anthony Richardson fan. However, this preseason, he looks like he doesn't even belong on the field. And the same thing that was at his biggest Achilles heel at Florida was his consistency at the quarterback position, where he went and played. Everyone remembers that little spinorama, little spin touchdown pass against Utah at the Swamp. That's kind of what put him on the map to go in the first round, outside of just the arm, but that really just gave him a lot more media attention. And pretty much after that, he was pretty putrid after that, I would say. And, the biggest excuse he got was, well, he doesn't have any receivers. He doesn't really have anyone around him. He had Travis Etienne Trevor Etienne and Ricky Pearsall, who just went in the first round for the 49ers. So clearly he had talent around him. So Anthony Richardson's just the biggest question mark for me. And we have historically been bad against the Colts, but I think that they're going to continue this run, and I'm going to take the Vikings win at home.
Okay. I do think that the streak continues against the Colts. I know we've really struggled against the Colts, and it was evident last year as well, where we had that comeback, or what was it, 2 years ago now? Sorry. And we struggled playing them in Indy as well. So I think it will be a lower scoring game than a lot of people think. It won't be like the comeback that we had a couple years ago. I think this will be probably like a 10-17 type game for the Vikings. And I think that we do drop, or no, what do I have here? I have a win against, sorry, I was looking too far ahead. I have a win against Indianapolis Colts. I think that we do squeak one by. I am just not a big Colts guy. I really don't I don't like that team. I don't know what it is. I just haven't been bought into it the past couple of years. This year especially, I don't know. Anthony Richardson may or may not be good. I don't know. I don't know. Shane Steichen really hit that. I don't know. He's taken that team over, done some good things with them, but I think that the Vikings do squeak one by. And then that leads us to our 3-game away stretch where we go on the road, kind of looking ahead at Jacksonville, at Tennessee, and at Chicago. Drew, how are we feeling about going on the road to Jacksonville? I believe the last time we were there was 2016. Pretty sure.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Sam Bradford.
Yep. The Jaguars, let's make of them. Let's just say their social team got a little too eager to sell playoff tickets, and they missed the playoffs. So I think it was like an 8-3 start after week 11 or week 12. Missed the playoffs. I think Doug Pearson's on the hot seat a little bit. I think that seat's warming up for him. Trevor Lawrence didn't really have as great of a year the following year after he just won a playoff game, after having one of the bigger comebacks to that season against the Chargers, just similar to what the Vikings did. But I do think with us going on the road into a place like Jacksonville with the Florida Heat, I'm going to give this as a loss to the Vikings. So I think that would bring them to 5-4 going on to the next week on a big road stretch too. So,
yeah, I think that the Jaguars are a better team than last year. I feel like they somewhat upgraded at wide receiver. Trevor Lawrence is going into another year. Have a Super Bowl winning head coach as well in Doug Peterson. I think that team is really good, and they were 8-3 for a reason to begin the year last year. And before things really fell off, I think that they do get better this next year. And they're just going to be one of those better teams in the AFC, a gauntlet AFC, that is. And I think the Vikings do drop one as well to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I could see this, not that it really matters, but uniform-wise, I could see the Jaguars kind of going like with a away uniform, and then the Vikings having to wear like a purple something, just so they can combat the heat. But kind of like what they did against the Dolphins a few years back. But anyway, I do think that is a loss against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Going back, next week to the Tennessee Titans, another AFC South opponent. Tennessee Titans are, I feel like, a really underrated team this year. I feel like they have a really good defense now this year as well. Offense, Will Levis going into another year. Their wide receivers are really good. Got DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd as well. So really underrated both sides of the ball. So, Drew, how are we feeling about the Tennessee Titans?
I think the Tennessee Titans are very similar to the Minnesota Vikings. I think they've got the roster around them. Defensively, they traded for L'Jarius Sneed. They added Chidobe Awuzie. I believe they have another corner in the mix too. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. No, outside of just
Sneed.
those two.
Oh,
not
okay.
Sneed. Sneed and Awuzie were the two outside corners. I think it's somebody in the slot. I want to say Sean Murphy-Bunting. I think he was on there last year. I don't know if he re-signed, but anyways, their corners are very good regardless. Amani Hooker's very underrated, the safety from Iowa. And then obviously you got Jeffrey Simmons, a very big name over there as well, coming in through the middle, which is one of the Vikings' weaknesses, especially on their O-line. And then, they also added Tony Pollard, Tyjae Spears, another very underrated guy going into year 2. Their running game is going to be very good. And like you said, they added Tyler Boyd as well. So I actually have this as a loss for the Minnesota Vikings going on the road to Tennessee. So I think that'll bring their record to 500 at 5-5 going into Thanksgiving weekend for that following week.
Okay. Yeah, I have a similar result where they do take a loss. Like I mentioned before, they're just better on both sides of the ball. Now, I don't know, like, comparing to the Vikings better on both sides of the ball, but we'll see by then how injuries play factor as well. But the Titans have upgraded on both sides of the ball, and that defense, I think, is really underrated. So we'll see how it plays once we play the Titans in the middle of November, and we'll see how that goes. On the road, in another NFC North showdown, we've played all NFC North opponents so far. This one is at Chicago on November 24th. Caleb Williams, first time playing against the Vikings. So, how are we feeling about this one?
Well, I've been on the record saying the Bears, for them to have a success, they have to start fast. This is where the schedule for them definitely does get harder. I think on paper they have a little bit more hype. The record will be better than what it actually is on the talent of the team. Really, that whole team really just relies on if they could start fast, because that second half of the season is pretty brutal for the Bears. On the road, we really haven't been great at Soldier Field. Lately, we've been picking up a lot of wins at Soldier Field, though. And I believe don't this is a primetime game either. I believe this is a noon game, which I feel like goes more into the Vikings' favor. I think they perform better at noon than they do on Monday Night Football. Their defense is definitely better. The Bears' offense is definitely better. A lot of it is just question marks with Rome Odunze. Was he going to be? I think he'll be very solid. Caleb Williams, the number 1 pick. But I do have this as a loss for the Vikings. I just think that they could give them a little bit too much trouble. I think their offense has definitely gotten better this past offseason, adding guys like Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and then obviously DJ Moore is a really good player. And Cole Kmet getting that extension, I think that new money is definitely kicking in now. So I'm going to have this as a loss for the Vikings, unfortunately, having us losing the next 3 games in a row on this road stretch.
Yeah, I have the Vikings coming back and winning this game. I don't know if the Bears will really put it all together, at least this year. On paper, that roster looks really good, but I don't know. Like, I think Caleb Williams will have a really good individual year, but there's a lot to be proven yet by him. And he's still a rookie quarterback, got a rookie wide receiver, decent offensive line as well. So aging wide receivers in Keenan Allen, DJ Moore is kind of in his prime as well. So we'll see how that all meshes together for Caleb Williams and that offense. Defense, I think, has gotten a little better as well, like you mentioned before. I just have a weird feeling that the Vikings, they don't play well at Soldier Field, but they will come out with a win this time around. So going into the last stretch of the season in December, we have December 1st versus the Arizona Cardinals in our 3-game home stretch. Now we had our 3-game away stretch, now home stretch. Arizona, Atlanta, and Chicago on Monday night. Arizona Cardinals, Kyler Murray. Who else do they have? They have Marvin Harrison. Outside of that, can't really name anybody else on that Cardinals team. So, Drew, is this a sleeper team for you? Is this what is this game for you?
They definitely have some young players. They drafted Trey Benson. They also drafted, I think his name's Denarius Robinson from Missouri. He's like a tweener between the interior and the edge positions, but I do believe he actually is having an injury right now to open up the season, which usually is not a good sign. Obviously they don't have Byron Murphy Jr. anymore. They really don't have any corners really worth naming, and really no one in the secondary besides Budda Baker. They gave Zaven Collins. I think they gave him an extension. I think this is going to be a win for the Vikings. I think the Arizona Cardinals, I think it's just Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison, maybe Trey Benson a little bit, and James Conner as well. But I think that the Vikings' talent is just too much. I don't see Sam Darnold having a stinker game against the Cardinals, especially with a defense and a roster like that. So I think this is the game where they get back to 500 and they go 6-6 to go into the second game. We'll talk about that in a sec.
Sure. I know every year there's always a trap game for the Vikings. Now, spoiler, I don't think that this is a trap game for the Vikings. If anything, I feel like it would be the Colts game if there was a trap game. But other than that, I think that the Cardinals will probably be one of the worst teams in the NFL, depending on how Marvin Harrison plays. If he's a replica of Justin Jefferson, Kyler Murray could have a really good year, and that Cardinals team could be really underrated. But I don't know how well they will put it all together in Arizona. But coming here, I think the last time we played the Cardinals at US Bank, I think we took.
It was 2022. We beat them.
We did beat them. That's right. Okay.
Yep,
yeah.
That was, that was the Kirk Cousins scramble on wheels, or Lamar Cousins.
The scramble.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So the last time they played us, we beat them in the Ed Donatel defense as well. That as we all know, it was a roller coaster year. So I do have them beating the Arizona Cardinals. Going on to December 8th, I think one that all Vikings fans are circling, because this is the Atlanta Falcons, the Kirk Cousins-led Atlanta Falcons. Kirko is coming back to Minnesota to play the Vikings at noon too. So everybody knows that he's the noon slayer. Will that trend continue, or will it be Michael Penix by the time this game comes around because of Kirk's Achilles or poor performance or whatever it is? We'll see. Drew, how are we feeling about this Atlanta Falcons game with Kirko coming back?
It's definitely going to be a big one. I have a lot of respect for Kirk, especially with all the crap he had to put up with the Mike Zimmer era. And then once Kevin O'Connell came in, he brought them back to a 13-win season, won us a playoff game. And he is one of the best franchise quarterbacks the Vikings have had in quite a long time, especially having that stability there. We had a couple of guys every now and then with Case Keenum, Brett Favre, but just bringing that stability to the quarterback position was definitely a big must for them. As much as a lot of our Kirk haters will hate it, he still was the best decision. Sam Bradford never really recovered after that knee injury, pretty much retiring after that following season. Teddy Bridgewater was a career backup at the end of it, and Case Keenum flamed out everywhere else he went. So it kind of tells you where the right decision was made. Kirk Cousins was that. As much as Mike Zimmer and all the Kirk haters will disagree, Kirk Cousins was the guy for us at that time. But unfortunately, he leaves for Atlanta. Money spoke. They got to get Justin Jefferson under contract. They got to get Christian Darrisaw under contract. Hawkinson, the position guys were starting to need paydays. So, unfortunately, it's one of those things you got to look for the future. So, going with the Atlanta Falcons game, Sam Darnold versus Kirk Cousins, I'm going to take the Vikings here. I think that this stadium is going to be very rowdy. I think this is going to be a sold-out stadium. And I think with the stadium being so rowdy, I think that's what kind of tips me into the favor of the Vikings for this one. just because of how much energy and passion these fans will bring to US Bank Stadium, especially being one of the loudest stadiums in the league. So I'm going to give the Vikings a win here to get off the schneid that they were having, losing 3 out of their last 4, and now start a winning streak back up in their little homestand to go, I believe it's 7-6. So going into that next week.
Yeah, with Kirk coming back, nobody knows Kirk Cousins as well as Kevin O'Connell does. He kind of unlocked Kirk Cousins a little bit the past couple of years. So, and then Brian Flores throwing some new stuff at Kirk. It's going to be a fun game to watch regardless. But I just have the Vikings falling in this one. I have them taking an L against the Falcons. Like I said, it's going to be a fun game to watch. And I do hope that the Vikings win. But my brain is telling me that I think Kirk Cousins will play just fine. That offense will be good. That defense is really underrated. And they're going to come back. Kirk Cousins can come back to US Bank Stadium and play well. I think he'll play well. And I think that they'll get a win over the Vikings, and the Vikings will take a loss. Now, on our final home games stretch, in our 3-game stretch, a second last home game of the season against the Chicago Bears. Our winner Warrior jerseys will be premiered in this game, Monday Night Football. Caleb Williams comes to US Bank Stadium. How we feeling?
We're not getting swept by the Bears. As much as the hype around the Chicago Bears is with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze and all those players that they've got on offense, we're not going to get swept by the Bears. I'm going to give us a win for this one, especially at home. Winter Warrior jerseys. I think it's too much for me to say. I just can't say with a straight face that the Bears are that team yet, especially, like I said earlier, they're going to be a team that second half of the schedule does get really rough. So if they don't start quickly, they're in a lot of trouble. And I do think that there'll be some games where they're going to be on a little bit more of a losing streak, and they're kind of starting to try to figure things out, try to throw random stuff out and see what works. But I think with it being a divisional game, I'm going to give the Vikings the win at home on prime time, which I believe it's a Monday Night Football game. So, which we've actually been really good against the Bears on Monday Night Football. So I believe we've played our last 3 or 4 Monday Night Football games against the Bears and have won all of them. So, yeah, like I said, I'm going to give the Vikings the win, and that'll bring them to 8-6 going to the next game.
All right, yeah, the next game. Did I give my prediction? No, I didn't. I think that they'll beat the Bears. I think that they'll sweep the Bears this year. Now they could split, honestly, against or at Chicago. I think that the Vikings could take an L, but I think that the Vikings take care of business at home and beat the Chicago Bears. Going on to Seattle. I always feel like we play Seattle late in the season. It feels like every year we play them. And I don't know. At least this time it's not a primetime game. And yeah, Seattle Seahawks, Geno Smith. I personally have this as a loss. Drew, how are we viewing this game?
All right. One of the loudest stadiums. We've always struggled against Seattle, and it felt like it was always a Monday Night Football game. It is not a Monday Night Football game. It is a noon game this time around. No more Pete Carroll. So that legendary coach is officially out. Mike McDonald, the rookie head coach, is in, coming from the Ravens, helped coach up David Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson at Michigan, bringing some different looks off the edge, kind of helped Michigan kind of get back to that top tier team they were with Jim Harbaugh, and then really fixed up that Ravens defense. He even made them a better unit than they were before after Wink Martindale left. He's a good coach, young coach. I actually have the Vikings winning this one. I think they'll be at 9-6 going to the next game. I think there's still some questions with Geno, and he is getting older too. It seems pretty short-lived, but he was drafted about a decade ago. So he's definitely getting up there. A lot of this could depend on injuries too. But I like our chances with this one. Especially, if we can run the football on them. They really tend to have a lot of weaknesses on their defensive line. I think Uchenna Nwosu, I think he's banged up, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check on that. but even then, he's an okay edge rusher, not a game wrecker. Byron Murphy II, I think that was a guy the Vikings were kind of interested in, went to the Seahawks. It's really the only guy who could potentially maybe give us some fits. They really don't have any, big safeties. I think Jamal Adams is gone now. Quandre Diggs, I think, is gone now. So I think there's a lot of retooling going on in Seattle, and I'm going to give this win to the Vikings. Like I said, bring them to 9-6 going into the next game for a very nice Christmas, pre-Christmas present for us. So,
yeah, like I said, I think that we do take a loss in Seattle. It might be, really crappy weather by then. Who knows how Seattle is? They're pretty bipolar over there. Whether you get rain, sun, snow, whatever it is. So, with that said, we're going to our last home game of the season, unless we make the playoffs and get the home field advantage. But outside of that, the Vikings take on the Green Bay Packers at home. Another noon game. As you guys can tell, there's a lot of noon games in the schedule. You guys may have figured that out before, but Jordan Love coming to US Bank Stadium. The last time he was here, he murdered the Vikings on national television on Sunday Night Football. I personally have a loss again against the Packers at home, so I do think that we split with them. And yeah, I think that we take our last home game as a loss.
yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you on this one. I don't see a scenario where we really sweep them. Obviously, things can change. Injury could possibly happen. I think that's really the only shot would probably, for me, at least consider changing my mind, is some major injury happening, who is having a big season, which we don't obviously wish for. I don't see us really sweeping them. I think Jordan Love and the Packers will start rolling by then. Especially, I have them winning the division this year, going for a playoff push. So playing for seeding, I don't see that scenario either where they'll be locked in by then. I don't see them as like the top team in the NFC either. So I'm going to have them as a loss for this one going into the last game of the season. So that'll bring, for me at least, for the Vikings to be 9-7 going into the last game.
Okay, and then to be determined for as for the date, sometime in January, they take on the Detroit Lions at Ford Field. Who knows if the Lions are resting their starters or not? We never know with Dan Campbell. He may as well be starting all of them, even though if he's locked up the first seed, we don't know. But regardless, I do have the Vikings taking a loss in this one as well. I think that we split with the Lions, one home win, one away loss. I guess not much else needs to be said other than what I kind of laid out before with playoff scenarios for the Lions. So that would bring me around 8-9 for the Vikings. And I've always said this, that they will hover around that 8-win mark, whether they get 9, 7 wins, whatever it is, 8 wins, like I predicted, 8-9 wins, or 8-9, I think will be their final record. Drew, what are we thinking for the last game of the season?
I'm going to have this the loss for the Vikings, 9-8 going into the season. I think Sam Darnold has a solid season, but not good enough to where it's a Case Keenum Cinderella story run and carries us to the promised land sort of thing. So I'm going to have this at 9-8. And 9-8, I mean, that is a team that could be a playoff team. I think playoff implications could be a possibility. I think with the Bears could be one with us splitting, but luckily they play the Packers, so we all know how the Packers love to curb stomp them and crush their dreams every single season. So that would be in our favor. And I do have us beating the Seattle Seahawks, which could be another fringe playoff team. The Saints could be a fringe playoff team. Bucks could be a fringe playoff team. So there's a lot of teams that I feel like are kind of like those fringe 9-8, kind of in that same window as the Vikings are. But I think we have a solid shot to make it, but a lot of it's going to depend on tiebreakers based on what other teams have done. But like I said, if going 9-8 with a backup quarterback, which we expected a little bit of JJ McCarthy at this time. If we go to the playoffs, like I've said, we go to the playoffs, it's great. we have a lot more confidence going into next season with McCarthy. The hype will definitely be around us based on that McCarthy week 1 performance. We'll have a lot of cap space, so there'll definitely be some guys out there. I think Charvarius Ward could be an option to get some more corner depth. Lee McNeil, possibly from the Detroit Lions, could be an option. Those are 2 guys kind of going in the outlook of next season. But like I said, if we stink it up and I'm totally wrong and I'm off by 4 wins, if we go like 5-12, you know what? I'll be glad to be wrong, because then you know what? Then we get a blue chip player to build around, a player that we've seen be very good so far in this preseason, and has been constantly been reassured by the fans that this guy is going to be good. He was the best guy that outperformed all the rookies in that preseason game. So I have a lot of hope. Vikings fans have a lot of hope. I think 2025 is going to be more of that season where we take that next jump. I don't think it's going to be this year. I don't think we'll win the division. I think there's a shot we finish last. So the Vikings are kind of a team that's all over the map because there's so much question marks on this team. Stephon Gilmore, can he keep it up? Obviously the biggest one being Sam Darnold, guy staying healthy. So we'll kind of have to wait and see how this season plays out. And, it's kind of nice for us to kind of sit back and watch and actually enjoy football without any expectations going into it, for me at least.
Yeah, and like any optimists out there, it's always fun to obviously root for the Vikings to win every single game. Obviously, as a fan, that's what you want them to do, unless you're one of the very few that want them to tank every season for some reason. That's always weird to me. But for me, I always want the Vikings to win every single game that they play, regardless. And that's always the goal, to win every single game. That the ownership and the coaches, they never want to lose a game for obvious reasons. That's their job. That's their business. That's what it is. 8-9, that's going to be flirting with the playoffs. Like Drew said, there's going to be some other weaker NFC teams in there that are going to be also flirting with the playoffs. And will 8-9 be a record that gets the Vikings in? Maybe. Will it maybe not be a record that gets them in? That's a good possibility too. So with a lot of NFC games, you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You have 7 NFC games in a row to end the season. So that's also going to play a big factor in how the playoffs will work this year. And 1, 2, 3, 4 of those games are all NFC North games. So, but we'll see how the Vikings do this year. That is mine and Drew's schedule predictions for the Minnesota Vikings. We'll take a look at this at the end of the year, see how close or not close we were throughout this year. And, things can change 100%. A lot of these wins can be losses. A lot of these losses can be wins. We'll see how this goes. We're in for a wild ride with Sam Darnold and company. So we'll see how this goes. And we will see you guys in the next episode. Skol Vikes.